Thursday the 14th of March, 11:23 a.m. I only have 20 minutes to finish this because there's so much storage this phone has built in, so we'll see if we can do that. Maybe don't diverge too much. And I've just shaved. Always bleeding because he's a safety razor. And I've been baking some bread, which I need to shape quite soon for the final rest. Sourdough is quite... shouldn't have diverged. Anyway. It's quite tedious. Where did I stop? So this is part 3B. Queen's Justice, Queen's Government. Functions of the Judiciary. Draft Constitution of the United States of America. Its plausibility in Britain derives from the fact that there really are three different central authorities in London. The Parliament sitting at Westminster, the government departments nearby in Whitehall, and the Royal Courts of Justice in the Strand. Nor is this geographical division purely an accident of history, because all three contribute to our system of government. We can say offhand that the criminal law should be made by representatives at Westminster and nowhere else, that a criminal ought to be tried with due formality and the utmost care by an independent and impartial judge, like the judges in the Strand, and that if he is found guilty and condemned to imprisonment, he should be placed in a prison controlled from Whitehall. When we try to define executive, in quotes, and judicial, in quotes, however, we find that it cannot be done. The fact that there is an empirical division between Whitehall and the Strand, empirical, solid, objective, observable, indisputable, I don't know, tangible. I don't know the full definition. And the Strand does not necessarily imply that there is a logical division. The life of the law of the Constitution has been not logic but experience. Sometimes it is not even experience nor yet expediency, but just history. The administration of insolvent estates, the care of wards in Chancery, in capital C, the control of trusts might have been allocated either to the Strand or Whitehall. The fact is that there is no class of acts called, quote, judicial, nor a class of acts called, quote, executive. As a result of criticisms by the lawyers in the 1920s, the Lord Chancellor set up a committee on ministers' powers, which reported in 1932. It did its best to define a, quote, judicial function, but completely failed because it defined in terms of procedure. Even... oh, this aftershave does smell nice. Pro Rosa. It's really creamy. It's like a balm, so it stops the burning sensation slightly and helps the skin. Not really relevant. Better than the alcohol solution. Although I haven't tried Old Spice or anything, but alcohol dries the skin. I think you want to moisturizer or a balm. Then it produced a class of functions called, quote, quasi-judicial. To say that a function is judicial when a judicial procedure is used is to say that an elephant is an elephant if she gives birth to an elephant. That's some sort of Aristotelian logic. I don't know. Weird. The question which we have to ask is whether a function should be given to Whitehall where an administrative process will be used, or to the Strand where a judicial process will be used. Even this is not an exact formulation because it assumes that, quote, administrative process and, quote, judicial process can be defined. No argument is needed to assert that the management of the Royal Navy should be allocated to Whitehall and the trial of persons accused of crime to the Strand. The question whether an order to repair defective drains should be issued by a sanitary inspector or a justice of the peace is not easily decided. In this borderland of administration and many of the functions of the modern state, it will be found that there are both advantages and disadvantages in allocating a function either to an official or to a court. The official is more experienced in this particular field, has a better knowledge of the consequences of default, e.g., in respect of defective drains, and has a more rapid and cheaper procedure. On the other hand, the judge is independent and has no axe to grind, is more cautious in jumping to conclusions, has greater experience in the weighing of evidence, and usually pays more attention to the interests of the citizen. In such conditions, all that one can do is to weigh the advantages against the disadvantages. What is interesting is the attitude which creates the controversy, and the notion that even the state must be careful of private rights, the belief that the official may be oppressive or impatient while the judge would be cautious and impartial. The Committee on Ministers' Powers did not succeed in segregating a judicial function from an administrative function. It did succeed in devising methods to prevent executive excesses its mere existence bore witness to the care which English law takes of the interest of the citizen. And this, by the way, entire book is a blowjob, like a 150-page blowjob from Sir Arthur Jennings, who is a constitutional lawyer and all that. Just how glorious the modern system of British democracy and monarchy and parliament is. He doesn't actually list that many faults. It's not really a critique. It's presented as an objective, authoritative account, but yeah, it's a succulent blowjob. Maybe I shouldn't be using that word, but what is more, the courts have developed a procedure for keeping administrative authorities under control. If Parliament confers power upon an official, the courts must recognise that power, but they may insist that he exercises it in such a way as not to prejudice the citizen. If Parliament has prescribed the procedure, the courts must recognise the validity of that procedure, but they may see that he operates freely and without bias. Above all, the courts will ensure that no official exceeds his powers. The fact that he acted bona fide, it's Latin in italics, and in the public interest, acted genuinely, I suppose, or that he was for the good, I don't know, or that he was acting under superior orders and in the name of the Queen is not a defence. The Crown and its officials have vast powers, and those powers are closely defined by law. Even in time of emergency, though there are special powers, there are limits beyond which the Queen's government may not venture without express parliamentary authority. On the war memorial in Lincoln's Inn is inscribed the maxim, inter arma silent leges. Silent leges. Inter arma silent leges. That's Latin in quotes, I suppose. The maxim is bad law. It comes from, in italics, the case of ship money, which I think was mentioned earlier in the book, where the decision of the majority was declared by... I'm not going to add notes, supplementary notes. Just if you're curious about a term or a case study, just assuming anyone is. I'm not even going to research it myself. I'm just reading to get a rough idea. Where the decision of the majority was declared by Parliament to be wrong. In time of war, the Queen has wider powers, but the laws are not silent. They still determine what her powers are, and any of her subjects can take legal proceedings if they exceeded the writ of habeas corpus. I should probably know what that is. Keeps rising in English history because it... Could just ask my uncle. Anyway. In English history, because it was and still is the ultimate legal remedy to protect the liberty of the subject, it is significant of English liberty, and a highly technical remedy of this kind should become the subject of political agitation. The right to freedom of the person is useless if there is no court to enforce it, or no remedy which the court may use. There are, however, other remedies of the same kind. I hope this is intelligible. It's quite fast. Remedies of the same kind more frequently needed in modern times. The writ of prohibition enables the court to issue an order upon an inferior court to restrain it from exceeding its jurisdiction, and the writ of certiorari, that's another Latin term, certiorari, to quash a decision which has been taken without jurisdiction. The writ of mandamus, enables the court to order an official upon whom a duty had been imposed to carry out that duty, while the writ of quo warranto could be used to compel an official to prove that he held his office. These writs have been superseded by other remedies, more rapid, cheaper, and more effective, but their essential principles remain in the law. An official is required by law to do his duty, not to exceed his powers, and to exercise his functions in a fair and impartial manner. What is more, if an official commits... No. Shames about brewing and distilling, party barbecue. That'd be interesting. Maybe we'll get methanol poisoning. That'd be fun. And salmonella. Or maybe I don't know. Go away. Interrupting my reading. What is more, if an official commits a wrong in the course of his duty... And yeah, James has been warned. I hope he doesn't antagonise the lads too much. We'll see. Hopefully he'll be a good boy and settle down, and we can still be friends. Fair and impartial manner. What is more, if an official commits a wrong in the course of his duties, he is as liable as a private citizen and can be sued in the courts. This admirable principle was not as effective in practice as it would seem at first blush. The Queen could not be sued by her own courts through a procedure, in brackets, petition of right, was devised for breaches of contract. To some extent, her mantle covered all central officials because they were her servants. Hence, though, the negligence of a private lorry driver in the course of his duty makes his employer liable. The negligence of a military lorry driver could not make his employer liable because the Queen was his employer. This problem was not a very serious one in practice because usually the Crown paid the damages. Nevertheless, there was no legal right to such payment, and the law was altered in 1947. Last passage of the book. Just a page. And subheading Government According to Law, which is kind of an ideal. It's government according, in reality, it's government according to force or majority or demagoguery or whatever. Incentives, whatever they can get away with, as far as people can recognise natural law, try and adhere to that and enforce it in a cost-effective, sort of neutral fashion. People going about checks and balances, like with the US, with their executive, legislative, and judiciary branch. But as you can see, the courts are really, they've been obstructing Trump for years. Is it years now at this point? So I suppose theoretically, yeah, they work, but also they can not work. They can really fuck shit up, like stop a border wall, or fuck with immigration restrictions when there's like a soft declaration of war between cultures or religions or sets of nations, whatever. The discussion has brought us around a circle. For we are back where we began, with Magna Carta and the rule of law. The official shares the healthy respect of the citizen for the law. His powers, or the powers of the Queen or the minister which he exercises, are closely circumscribed by law. British legislation is in sharp contrast with the legislation of countries which have not followed the British tradition. It's not merely empowering legislation, conferring on the Queen or the minister or the official or general power to solve a particular social or economic problem, and goes into vast detail specifying what the Queen or the minister or the official may do, how it may be done, and what remedies are available to those who suffer from administrative action. So it's like a manual for government or legal mechanics. God, go away. No, stop.